Arkansas holds a history written in crumbling concrete and weathered wood, hidden behind the thick forests of the Ozarks and the quiet flow of the White River. It is not only about beautiful natural scenery, but also a silent witness to human ambition that eventually lost to nature, economics, and time. We are not just talking about empty buildings, but about how communities that once felt alive could vanish from the map. This is a journey into the corners of Arkansas, now inhabited only by silence and memory. Standing on the edge of Beaver Lake, you might never guess that beneath its calm surface lie the remains of a resort once considered an Arkansas icon. Monte, founded by William Hope Coyne Harvey in the early 1900s, was an ambitious vision of luxury in the mountains. It had grand hotels, a golf course, and even gondolas carrying guests across an artificial lagoon. But the Great Depression and financial failure ended that dream. Its final blow came in the 1960s, when a dam project created Beaver Lake and submerged much of the town. What makes Monte Ne unique is that it becomes a ghost, only at certain times. The concrete tower of Oklahoma Row is the only structure still visible along the lakeshore. During long dry seasons, however, building foundations and the large amphitheater structure rise again from the lakebed, like an ancient monster waking up. This phenomenon makes Monte Ne one of the most iconic places for anyone searching for history swallowed by nature. Moving toward the Buffalo National River area, we find Rush, officially one of the best preserved ghost towns in Arkansas. Unlike places that only leave foundations behind, here you can still see rows of wooden houses, mining structures, and rusted iron equipment. At its peak, thousands of people lived on these hillsides, building their lives around mines that promised wealth. But once the war ended, zinc prices collapsed. One by one, residents left their settlement behind. In the 1960s, the final post office officially closed, marking the end of life in the town. Today, Rush is managed by the National Park Service as a historic district. You can walk along trails that pass the remains of once grand but fragile ore processing buildings. The silence here sharply contrasts with the noisy past of rock-crushing machines. Next, long before Little Rock became the seat of government, Arkansas Post was the heart of this region. Founded in 1686, it was the first European settlement in the lower Mississippi River Valley. As the first capital of the Arkansas Territory, its location where the Arkansas and White Rivers met made it a highly strategic trading point. But what was economically useful became geographically cursed. Major floods repeatedly struck the settlement, forcing the government to move the capital to a safer place. The final destruction of Arkansas Post came during the American Civil War, in a fierce battle that nearly leveled what remained of its buildings. Today, the area is a national memorial. Very few original structures remain. Most of the old town has been eroded by shifts in the river's course. Moving into the remote forests of Clark County, we find the remains of Graysonia, an industrial town that was once home to one of the largest sawmills in the state. At its peak in the 1910s, Graysonia was known as a self-contained town with hundreds of homes for workers. But because it was a company town fully dependent on the timber industry, its future was limited by the trees around it. After the surrounding forests were heavily cut down, company operations stopped in the 1950s. Once the mill closed, the town died within months. Today, Graysonia is like a laboratory where nature is taking back the land. Massive concrete structures that were once part of the factory machinery are now covered in moss and tree roots. There is also Hopefield, a clear example of how nature can erase a town from the map almost overnight. Located along the Mississippi River, directly across from Memphis, Tennessee, this town was once an important transit point for railroads and steamboats. Because of its strategic border location, Hopefield was targeted by Union forces during the Civil War as punishment for Confederate guerrilla activity. Although it was later rebuilt, the final attack came from the Mississippi River itself. The Great Flood of 1912 literally washed away much of the land where the town stood. The river shifted its course, and the remains of Hopefield either sank or were buried under layers of mud. Today, almost nothing remains of Hopefield except historical records and geographic coordinates, now located in the river current or nearby swampland. Then there is East Calico, which is different from most places like this. Its uniqueness comes from being a ghost town inside a living town. If you visit Calico Rock, you will find an active downtown with small shops. But if you walk a few blocks toward the river, you enter the fully abandoned East Calico district. This area was once the main business center when the railroad was still powerful in the early 20th century. Around 22 structures still stand here, from the Old Town Jail and warehouses to a former grocery store. These buildings have been left as they are, creating a very real view of a frozen past. The reason this district was abandoned is simple. Repeated river flooding forced residents to move their center of activity to higher ground. East Calico now serves as an open-air museum for anyone who wants to see how a business district slowly surrendered to nature. Just like its name, this town was born from the discovery of zinc deposits in northern Arkansas. Located in a deep valley in Boone County, zinc once became a promising settlement in the late 1800s. But difficult transportation access and unstable ore quality made it hard for the town to survive. A flash flood that destroyed the town's infrastructure in the 1920s became the final blow that triggered residents to leave. Today, Zinc technically still has a few residents, but visually, it feels like a ghost town. Rusting old bridges, a collapsed school building, and leaning wooden homes create a deeply quiet atmosphere. No commercial activity remains. For those passing through, Zinc looks like the remains of a civilization that failed to hold on against the harsh geography of the Ozark Mountains. Next, have you ever heard of a town called OK? Its name may sound optimistic, but its history ended rather bitterly. The town was founded in the 1920s to support the ideal Portland Cement Company plant. Like Graysonia, OK was a company town. Everything in town, from the houses to the stores, was owned by the factory. For decades, the plant supplied cement for major infrastructure projects across the United States. But modernization and market changes made the factory's operations inefficient. When the plant finally closed in the 1990s, the town lost its reason to exist. Residents were forced to move because the homes they lived in belonged to the company. Now, all that remains in OK is the wide abandoned cement plant area and roads that seem to lead nowhere, creating a sharp contrast with its unusual name. A discussion about Arkansas would not be complete without mentioning Booger Hollow. This place is better described as a roadside attraction that became a ghost town. Located along Highway 7, Booger Hollow was once a legendary stop for travelers. With a sign claiming a population of 7 people and 1 coon dog, it offered an eccentric taste of the Ozark Hills. Its main features, including the souvenir shop and the building claimed to be a 2-story outhouse, are now abandoned and covered in brush. Although it was not a town in the traditional administrative sense, Booger Hollow represents the golden era of roadside tourism before the internet age. Seeing it now, with peeling paint and rotting wood, creates an ironic nostalgia for how a local joke could turn into a sad ruin. In the late 19th century, Pinnacle Springs was seen as a place of healing. Many people believed the water from its mineral springs had medical benefits. Because of this belief, a resort town quickly grew in Faulkner County, complete with large hotels and a college. Pinnacle Springs briefly became a popular destination for Arkansas's upper class. But the golden age of health tourism did not last long. As medical trends changed and road access to other areas improved, Pinnacle Springs lost its appeal. A major fire later destroyed many of the main wooden buildings, and the town was never rebuilt. Today, the site can only be identified through a few stone foundations buried in the ground, along with stories of magical springs now flowing through a silent forest. Hidden in Marion County, Eros is a classic example of a farming community that slowly disappeared. Its name comes from the Greek god of love, though no one really knows why that name was chosen for a small settlement in the Arkansas hills. Eros did not die because of a major disaster, but because of changes in modern life. As cars became common, residents preferred shopping in larger towns, and slowly, local businesses in Eros closed. Today, only a few old buildings remain, including fragile church and school structures. Almost like Eros, Bruno was once a town that served as an education center for its area. Located near Highway 125, Bruno had a fairly large high school in the early 1900s. The town became a gathering point for people from across Marion County to trade and receive education. But school district consolidation and the decline of the farming population caused Bruno to lose its purpose. The iconic old school building now stands as a silent witness to its former glory. Its strong stone structure still looks impressive, even though its windows have been broken for years. Today, Bruno is only a quiet crossroads, where the past feels more real than the present. Next, there is Gilbert, often called one of the smallest surviving towns in America, located along the Buffalo National River. Gilbert technically still has a town government and a few permanent residents, but its atmosphere feels very close to a ghost town. Early 20th century wooden buildings, such as the Gilbert General Store, remain preserved in their original condition. The town was once an important railroad endpoint for the timber industry. When the railroad stopped operating, Gilbert seemed to freeze in time. There are no traffic lights, no modern rush. Today, its life depends almost entirely on river tourism. Although it is not truly dead, Gilbert represents a settlement that refuses to change, making it an atmospheric destination for anyone wanting to feel the last breath of the past. Entering the Arkansas Delta, we find Elaine. This town carries a much heavier and darker history than the others. In 1919, Elaine became the site of one of the deadliest racial riots in American history, known as the Elaine Massacre. The event left a deep wound that affected the town's growth for generations. Economically, Elaine depended heavily on cotton farming. But agricultural mechanization in the mid-20th century sharply reduced the need for human labor. As a result, the town's population declined severely. Today, walking through Elaine feels suffocating. Rows of downtown shops are boarded up, and empty houses appear on almost every corner. Elaine is still inhabited, but the shadow of the past and systemic poverty make it feel like a town standing on the edge of extinction. Finally, we have to talk about Pine Bluff. This is not a small town in the woods, but a large city slowly transforming into a ghost town on an alarming scale. Once a prosperous industrial and cultural center in Arkansas, Pine Bluff is now known as one of the fastest shrinking cities in the United States. The decline of manufacturing and complex social problems have caused thousands of people to leave. In its downtown, you can see a scene that is both sad and grand. Tall office buildings and historic theaters now sitting empty with broken window glass. Streets designed for thousands of vehicles often look almost deserted. Pine Bluff is a modern warning that economic and social failure can weaken a city of any size. It appears to be the process of becoming a ghost town, happening in real time right in front of us.